So there's a new Batman movie coming out. It seems like we get a new Batman movie every couple of years. There's been probably a dozen or more in my lifetime and a couple of TV shows. And I was just thinking recently that Batman has this one thing in common with Jesus. The thing that Batman has in common with Jesus is they both have this incredible story. It's been told many times by different people, but it's still one story. So the reason why I'm talking about this today is that today we're starting the Gospel of Mark. It's our second Gospel reading, and you're going to notice right away it's different from the Gospel of Matthew. One of the first big differences you're going to notice is there's no Christmas story in the Gospel of Mark. What? Mark doesn't like Christmas? For some reason or another, Mark doesn't find it important to talk about Jesus as a baby and about him being born. In chapter 1, Mark talks about John the Baptist. We heard about John the Baptist from Matthew. Mark talks about John the Baptist and how he's preparing the way, and then he jumps right to Jesus being baptized. Matthew told us about Jesus being baptized, and what's really cool is the baptism of Jesus is almost the same story right here in Mark. It's worded a little differently, but it's the same thing. He then goes into the temptation of Jesus, and he starts going straight from the temptation of Jesus into his ministry, all very quickly here in the first chapter. So why is the Gospel of Mark so different right away from the Gospel of Matthew? Well, it's sort of like different Batman movies tell different parts of his story. You have some movies that focus more on Batman's childhood and how he came to be Batman. There's some movies that really focus on him discovering the symbol of bats as this dark, mysterious symbol of justice. Some Batman movies focus on the villains themselves. The Gospels, the different versions of the Gospel, work very similarly. We have different acts that he performed, different miracles. We have different conversations that he had with people, and we have them told slightly differently from different angles. And some of those stories don't appear in each of the Gospels. But all of these Gospels together ultimately tell the same story of Jesus Christ dying for our sins, being resurrected, raised again, and forgiving all of our sins. They all tell the story of God's mercy and how God's mercy is completed, how God's law and God's will are completed in the beautiful sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Probably the coolest thing about the gospel is that you and I get to tell the gospel story too. Think of yourself as you are directing your own Batman movie. Every time you encounter someone and you tell them about Jesus Christ, you're letting them know, this is Jesus. This is who he is. This is what he's done for us. He has died for our sins. He has saved us from our sins. In order to tell the story of Jesus, you need to know the story of Jesus. And that's why we're reading through the Gospels. If you haven't joined us yet in reading through the Gospels, we're starting the first chapter of Mark today. If you missed the Gospel of Matthew, you didn't read it with us, go ahead and skip over it for now. Join us in the Gospel of Mark and read through the Gospel of Mark with us. We're reading one chapter every day. I hope you'll join us today in reading the Gospel of Mark. Join us this week as we're reading the first 7 chapters of Mark.